There were meant to be 4 episodes in this series, I noticed, Dave.
Yes.
Modern Life Is Goodish.
Yes.
And yet there's only 3 to be broadcast. Was it because you had like a big whole episode about your obsession with breasts exploding and...
Something like that.
It's quite similar, actually.
Yeah, it is quite similar. Yeah, no, I don't know how to put this. There's one episode that we made where about 75% of the material is about Greg Wallace. And...
supporting him in everything he does.
It's a bit of a love-in for Greg. Obviously, sometimes with my tongue in my cheek, but a sort of love-in for Greg. And it doesn't matter how many caveats you put on it. If you showed it to an audience now, it would have a, why are you saying these things? Like, this makes no sense. It just lost all of its context. So it was a thing that Live used to bring the house down, and Greg was involved in the material as well, so he's also filmed something for it. So that adds another layer of you shouldn't have done this to it. And what I'm saying is, in this whole Greg Wallace thing, I'm the real victim. My son is 9 and he doesn't understand nuance. And Eric, that is not true.
Luckily, you were able to reshoot the whole thing with Wyn Evans, though, weren't you? So it worked out fine.
No, and it's one of those. Again, it's sort of the nature of the material I do. So there's routines that are explicitly about him, but then there's 2 other routines which appear to not be about him, but they circle back to callbacks about the first routine about him. So it literally is the whole episode has an unfortunate phrase, the glue is Greg Wallace in that episode. So it just is impossible to have it make sense. So unfortunately, we made 4 and only 3 of them will see the light of day. Which means there's 2 things in one of the previous series, and I'm not allowed to go into this, but there was a thing mentioned in series 4 or 5 where I read on stage a legal letter, and there's another thing we had done that we weren't allowed to broadcast, and it involves an egg wall, and I'm not allowed to tell you what that is, but if you've watched the previous series, you might know there is a thing called the egg wall, which was a thing we had filmed, and we're not allowed to include it in any series for legal reasons. And now the other thing we're not allowed to include is a Greg Wallace, which is egg wall with a grut at the beginning and an ace at the end. So weirdly, there were clues. There were clues there. And if we do another series, we're not going to do anything about the bar Greg Wallace.
Yeah, it is. It's not. I guess the sort of similar but different thing happened to us with when we were doing the Small of Rich Not Judy. We decided to bring back the character from Fist of Fun, which was the false Rod Hull.
Oh, yeah.
And so we filmed a load of sketches of the false Rod Hull doing various activities. So we had a character who was a man who's pretending to be Rod Hull. So he had to
Kevin Eldon, wasn't it?
It was Kevin Eldon. He had like a fake arm. He didn't have emu, he just had the fake arm. And so... So he would go swimming, or he'd go fencing, or he'd play rugby. And everything he did in the sketches... he would die because he wouldn't admit that he wasn't Rod Hull and that he had 2 arms and stuff. So he drowned in the first one. He got stabbed, and we were sitting on the set rehearsing the first week's thing, and I saw like someone coming, whispering to the director, and then they said, "Okay, now we have to have a meeting." And they said, "We have." The news has come in that Rod Hull has fallen off a roof and sadly died, and then. And we go, oh, we can't. And which would have been a really good version of the sketch. And so we'd filmed all this stuff on a quite low-budget TV show, and so the executive producer said, well, can I watch the things and see if we can still put them out? And he watched me and said, no, we can't.
No. This isn't even the most poor taste conversation about this on a podcast. Have you heard that? You know who said they are responsible for?
Oh, I did hear this. I've forgotten though.
It's Giles Brandreth.
Yes,
was in all the papers recently with headlines saying "I killed the Emu Man," and I listened to the clip, and I genuinely like Giles. Whenever I've met him, he's been lovely, and he's very good company. But I listened to the clip. He's got a podcast, and he had John Cleese as a guest. And the clip, which I found on a news site, whatever, doesn't have what's happened before it. But clearly, John Cleese must have talked about someone dying, possibly laughing at Python or something. Something like that has gone on. Yeah. And Giles is like a schoolboy in a pissing contest who feels, and he goes, oh yeah, no, I've killed someone as well. I killed someone. And he's sort of competing for Cleese's affection by telling him the story of how he killed Rod Hull. And his story is they'd gone to the theatre that afternoon, and Rod was complaining because his TV reception was all over the place, and he wanted to watch the football that night. It was a Man United Champions League game. And Giles had said to him, well, get on the roof and fix your aerial then. Don't be an idiot. The best thing about this story for me is that a week later, there's new headlines going, it wasn't Giles that killed him, it was me. And there's an aristocrat, I think it's Lady Bradford or something like that,
right,
who's like, no, I was at the theatre with Rod Hull that day. Giles wasn't there. I'm the one who told him to get on the roof. And there's this weird competition for posh people, to claim they killed him.
He killed Rod Hull. But look, it's the thing I like about Modern Life Is Goodish is that it does go quite. I'm not surprised you get into a little bit of legal trouble every now and again. You do kind of skirt around the Google stuff that you do in this first episode, where you discuss why you're not allowed to talk about Google on TV programs and stuff.
Yeah.
You are then talking about Google, and you're talking about all the things and the reasons why you're not allowed to talk about Google on TV programs.
Yeah.
So how does that go through the legal minefield and get broadcast?
I was really surprised we got away with that, because I do think there's a bullshit thing where, and it winds me up when I'm watching TV and someone uses a search engine that is clearly a bullshit search engine. You're immediately thrown out of the reality. You're watching a really good drama, you're hooked into it, and then they use a thing called Find a Spider. And, it's like a red light going on, this is all made up, and it throws me out of it. And I think you drive cars in these dramas with badges on that we recognise. That's a Ford and that's a Chrysler, and that's all allowed. And every other brand is allowed to exist as a thing in the world. But for some reason, we've all afforded Google this protection, and they're allowed to go, our rules say you're not allowed to use us. Like, fuck it. You are allowed to use it. Right? Yeah. So I wanted to talk about that on the show, and I thought the lawyers would be up in arms about it, and the lawyers are like, oh, well done. Oh, yeah, yes, because it's sort of a legal argument I'm making.
Yeah.
So I'm making the legal argument in the show, and the only notes were these sort of legal notes of you have to explain that they're not responsible for the content you find and things like that. And then you come back with a joke that explains that. They go, great, carry on. What it did do is, having done it, it made the rest of the show more legally difficult, because then they were like, you've got a watertight argument, you've made a really strong legal case for why that should happen, why you should be allowed to say it. That's great. But then there are other things where ordinarily we would have used like a Google map of something, and you'd put a Google logo in the corner, and that's okay, and that's within their rules. And then because we've had a go at them, they're like, we're not going to risk you showing a Google. Even within their rules, we're now going to let you in other episodes use them for anything, in case they have a tantrum about the thing that you've done in that episode, and then they come back and say you should have asked for permission for this, and they get, and then we've pushed them.
Yeah.
So they sort of I thought, oh, this is going great, and then it made the rest of the series a fucking nightmare legally. My favourite thing we did, there was a thing in one of the early series, and it made things legally easier afterwards as well. So it was a silly visual joke. I'd done it live, and it worked. And it was basically, there was a copy of Hello magazine with Prince William on the front wearing a blue jumper, and all of the text on the magazine cover just fitted on his jumper, and none of it was off his jumper. So it was a silly visual joke of saying, I asked my dad what he wanted for Christmas, and he said, I don't know, just get me a pullover. I said, anything you like. So I saw one on the cover of a magazine, Prince William. Oh, okay, and we get then we had a jumper with all the text printed on it, right? So it's a silly visual joke. And then And I'm completely okay with. I think copyright should exist. Obviously, I use a lot of found content in my shows. Lots of screen grabs from websites and news sites and things in the shows. And I think I'm not using it to get the same emotional reaction that they intended. I am repurposing it and using it for something else, and I'm criticising it, and I'm making a point. And I think that is legally sound. But on this, the lawyers came back and said, well, we need to ask Hello Magazine for permission to use it because you're using their photo. Sure. I said, well, I'm making a comment about their photo. I'm pointing out that their typesetting made it look silly.
Yeah.
So you don't say that. And if you're not, we need to ask for permission. So they asked for permission, and Hello Magazine said no. So they said, you can't do it. And I said, but I'm making a point about how silly the cover looks. That's not. They haven't put it on the mag. You can send the newsagents for free. You can all look at the cover for free. You can all look at that and go, that's silly. Like, why is me pointing that out legally difficult? Because the joke doesn't say, look at how silly the typography is. They have like. Right. I said, but the fact that people laugh at it proves that they understand that is the point I'm making. Right. So it's a tacit point, but it is a point that I'm making. Not allowed to do it. Not allowed to do it. Okay, all right. So we went round the houses. We came up with a thing where I said. So I do the joke, we get the laugh, and then I say to the camera, by the way, our lawyers say I'm not allowed to do that because unless I get permission from Hello Magazine. The options are I can either get permission or I can make comment and review on their magazine cover. So we asked for permission, and Hello said no. So now I have to make a point about the magazine cover, and I think the person who designed that is a fucking idiot, and that is the worst magazine cover I've ever seen in my life, and that now made it allowable. And we did find that after that we got a lot more people saying yes when we asked for permission.
Brilliant. So look, it's all the what's the channel called? Is it changed? Is the channel changed its name now?
The channel is now called You and Dave. The letter U, ampersand Dave. Okay. Yeah, okay. Because everything's always better when it gets a little bit more complicated.
I think so.
Yeah.